All right, so Act Two, Scene Three. So we know we're going to have a party. So Othello basically goes off with Desdemona. He literally says, "The purchase made." This is in around line 10. "The purchase made, the fruits are to ensue. That profits yet to come between me and you." So again, we talked about how he has not got to consummate his marriage with Desdemona yet, and that's basically what he's saying. We've made the purchase, we've gotten married, but the fruits are to ensue. Like we haven't got to consummate yet. So they go off literally to consummate their marriage. And Cassio and Iago are on the watch. But Iago starts to try to convince Cassio to drink because he knows that if Cassio gets drunk, then he gets angered easily. Cassio says, "I have very poor and unhappy brains for drinking." Yet, peer pressure, and it happens. Eventually, Cassio says, "I'll do it, but it dislikes me." Iago convinces him, which is what we see happening a lot in this play of Iago convincing different people of different things. So then Cassio leaves, he goes and drinks, and we have a kind of a little maybe a soliloquy, maybe breaking the fourth wall, talking to the audience, that Iago has while Cassio's gone. And he talks about this, like, if I can fasten one cup upon him, if I can do this, then I'll make him fight, and this will be whatever. So he kind of tells the audience that. And then the next time we see Cassio, he's already drunk. "For God, they've given me a rouse already." And the rest of this here is Iago pretending to be drunk along with him and a bunch of the men basically around singing and drinking and whatever. So Cassio is drunk. He even says he has this part where he's like, "Do not think that I am drunk. Here is my left hand. Here is my right hand." Like he's totally drunk. So, um, and so Cassio kind of stumbles off, and Iago again, like when he did it with Brabantio, tries to lay the framework for receiving information with Montano, who again is like an important dude on Cyprus. He says, "You see this fellow that has gone before?" Talking about Cassio. "He's a soldier fit to stand by Caesar and give direction, but do but see his vice." So he's like, "Look, this is a great dude, but he gets drunk so much," which we know is not true. Cassio just says, "I don't drink a lot." He was trying not to drink, and Iago convinces him to, and then he's like, look at this dude who's always drunk." And Montano is like, well, the general will put in mind of this. Like, we should tell Othello. Like, this is his lieutenant. Like, we should tell him if this is a problem." And Iago's like, "Not I, for the fair island. I do love Cassio well." So he's like, I love Cassio too much. I could never say anything. I don't want to see him anything bad happen to Cassio." So he's doing this thing again, like he did with Brabantio. He kind of points something out and makes it look bad, but then he doesn't want to be caught like being the one doing it. So he says this to Montano, like, "I love Cassio so much, but look what he's doing." So then the next thing that happens is Iago sends Rodrigo to go provoke Cassio, and he does. So we hear calls off stage of "Help, help," because off stage, apparently Rodrigo and Cassio have started fighting. So they come back on stage and there's a fight. Um, Rodrigo has provoked him. Cassio tries to stab Rodrigo, and Rodrigo gets hurt and then runs off. Montano tries to stand between them, Cassio and Rodrigo, and Montano says, "Come, come, you're drunk. Like, just stop this fighting. You're drunk." And Cassio's like, "Drunk," and he gets angry and starts fighting Montano, which is real bad. Montano is important on this island. So this big fight breaks out, and Iago tells Rodrigo to go run and cry mutiny, like basically wake everyone up. So he does. And then Othello is woken up and comes in. So remember, not only is Othello woken up in the middle of the night to do this, but Othello has just gone to consummate his marriage with Desdemona, and now it is interrupted again by this fight. And it's not just a fight and then he can go back to bed. This is like a big thing he's gonna have to deal with. So, second time Othello and Desdemona have been interrupted in trying to consummate their marriage. So, Othello, says some interesting things when he breaks up this fight. "Are we turned Turks, and to ourselves do that which heaven hath forbid the Ottomites?" So remember, Othello is a Turk basically, like he's a Moor, right? It's kind of the same as Turk Ottomite. And they've been fighting the Turks, which is interesting because, again, Othello is basically from that region. A little bit different, but basically from that region. And then um, he's comparing what these men are doing to the Turks and Ottomans. And then he says for Christian shame. So he's kind of like again, impugning their religion, even though that was probably the religion he was brought up in. It kinda seems like here that Othello must have converted to Christianity. And there's a few other places that kind of indicate that as well, which is all fine and good, but he's, kind of slandering or talking bad about this whole group that he is a part of, really. Um, and that's how he's saying, like, "You guys are acting like Turks," which is interesting. I would probably call this some internalized racism. So, instead of just calling out their actions, he's comparing it to a group, but it's really his own group in some sense. So, I think this is him also trying to distance himself from that. Like he is not a part of that, which is interesting. Um, so he asks Iago again, calling him honest Iago, which is what we see a lot. Is Iago is called that. And Iago's like, "I don't know." Like, he's like, honest Iago, tell me what happened." "Oh, I don't know." It's kind of this reverse psychology thing. Iago is doing this like, "Don't ask me. I don't know what's going on." Even though he does, and he wants to be the one to tell it because he wants to tell it the way he wants, but he's gonna act like he really doesn't wanna say anything. He doesn't wanna be the one to do anything, which is interesting. Um, so we go back and forth, like, "Cassio, what happened?" "Oh, I'm too drunk to tell you." "Montano, what happened?" "Oh, I'm too hurt to tell you." So finally, Othello is upset about this, and he mentions some of the things in our background knowledge. "My blood begins my safer guides to rule, and passion, having my best judgment I don't know, essays to lead the way." Basically, he's saying his blood, his passion is about to take over his judgment, and, like, I'm losing my temper. Let's like get this out. So eventually, Iago says it. What happened? Obviously he doesn't say that he started it, but Iago tells like, "Oh, I don't know what happened, but Rodrigo," or he doesn't say Rodrigo because remember Rodrigo is wearing a fake beard. Like it's just some random person to them. So Iago tells how Cassio was fighting with someone, and then Montano tried to get in the middle, and then Cassio started fighting Montano. But before he begins that story, he says, "I had rather have this tongue cut from my mouth than it should do offense to Michael Cassio." So again, he's trying to act like he loves Cassio and he doesn't want anything bad to happen to him, even though literally he set this whole thing up. So Othello says, "I know, Iago, thy honesty and love doth mince this matter, making it light to Cassio." I just like that idea. Like, first of all, he's saying Iago's so honest and loving. But that's where we get that phrase mince the matter. Like he's trying to make it look smaller than it is. That's a good phrase. I like that. That there. So he fires Cassio then and there. "Cassio, I love thee, but never more be officer of mine," because he has caused this mutiny. He has not kept the peace. So Cassio is fired, which great. Like, well, I mean, not great for Cassio, but like Iago should be happy, right? Like Cassio's fired. We should be happy. Um, and so then they go off, and then we're left with just Iago and Cassio. Apparently, Iago's not done with getting Cassio fired. Cassio's so upset. He sobers up and he's like, "Oh, I've lost my reputation. I've done this horrible thing. What do I do?" So Iago gives him some advice. And he says to talk to Desdemona. It's like Cassio, like first he's like, "Oh, ask Othello for your job back. He'll give it to you." And then Cassio's like, "I can't. I've been like so awful. I can't imagine asking Othello because he'll be like, 'You were drunk,' and I'll be like, 'Yeah, I was.' Like, what do I say to that? You're right. I was awful." And so he says, "Look," Iago says, "Go to Desdemona." Um, he says, our general's wife is now the general. Yeah, our general's wife is now the general. Like, she can convince him to do whatever. Like, he loves her so much, she can convince him. So go to Desdemona. She will help you get your job back. Importune her help to put you in your place again. So he's like, yeah, actually, that's a great idea. And it is a great idea. So Cassio leaves saying, that's what I'll do. I'll talk to Desdemona and see if she will help me. And again, calling him honest Iago. But now we have another Iago soliloquy here, right around line 355. Um, so I mean, if we think about this before we get to what Iago says, like it is good advice. Like if Iago were actually friends with Cassio, if Iago really did want Cassio to get his job back, that is probably the advice he'd give. Like that's probably the best way to get his job back is to ask Desdemona. Good advice. But that's not why Iago obviously doesn't want him to get his job back. What Iago wants is to have opportunities for Cassio and Desdemona to be seen together. Remember, he said, "With as little web as this, will I catch as great a fly as Cassio." Like he's going anytime they're together, he's going to use that to try to catch Cassio. And apparently, he means catch Cassio not just in like getting him out of that job because that's done. Like Cassio's fired, the job's open now, but he's not done. Iago, that's not what satisfies Iago. He wants more revenge. Before he said he wants to be evened with um, Othello wife for wife. Like he wants to put him in jealousy. He wants to poison him. Like he's kind of going off the deep end here. So in this soliloquy, this is my favorite soliloquy from Iago, and he has some lines here that make it my favorite lines. But he starts it with, "And what's he then that says I play the villain?" And here's why I think he's breaking the fourth wall here because he talks to the audience and it's like, with this known role of being a villain, he's like, y'all think I'm the villain here? Like, who says I'm the villain? This advice that I'm giving Cassio is honest. Indeed, the course to win them more again. Like he's like, this is good advice. I'm doing exactly what I should do. And he brings up that, like, it's Desdemona will totally help Cassio with this, and that Othello will listen to Desdemona because Othello's soul is so embittered to her love. I think here he's kind of trying to put a dig in on Othello, say that he's too attached to Desdemona. Remember that was supposed to be a bad thing if you were, like, too enamored with your wife. So the first part of this, he's kind of all saying this, like, "Oh, I'm giving good advice, whatever." And then there's a turn, there's a shift here when he says divinity of hell, which is an interesting paradox, might be a good literary term for you to mark. A paradox where, two contradictory things are put together. So he says divinity of hell. This is the goodness of hell. So he goes on to say, when devils with the blackest sins put on, they do suggest at first with heavenly shows as I do now. So when you're trying to be the worst, when a devil is being its worst, the blackest sins, he has to start by using heavenly shows. This kind of is that white devil idea, in a sense, even though that usually referred to women. Like the idea is that um, like, if you're just bad, like, if you're just, like, I don't know, like, so obviously bad, like, going around being mean to people and, like, stabbing them or whatever, okay, that's bad. But what's really bad is when you're betrayed by someone you love or someone you thought was perfect or thought was so great, and then they stab you, that is worse, whether the stab is literal or metaphorical, whatever. And that's kind of what he's saying is, like, the worst sins come from a place of deceit where you think someone is good at first. Um, and here are the lines that I love because it really truly shows how evil Iago is being and how like maniacal. He says, and by how much she strives to do him good, saying Desdemona, like Desdemona is going to plead for Cassio to Othello, and by how much she strives to do him good, she shall undo her credit with the more. So will I turn her virtue into pitch, and out of her own goodness make the net that shall enmesh them all. So basically, he's like, not only is he going to be bad, but he is going to use other people's goodness against them. He's going to turn other people's goodness into bad. And here's where I like to bring up the board game Othello. I don't know if any of you know about it. Let me show you a picture. So if we look here, just Googled it. So this is the game Othello. Sometimes it's called Reversi. But basically you play it by, like, if you look at a board, um, like, okay, let's look at this one. So if you look at this one, like, if the white player puts a white one right here, it would turn the black ones in between the two white ones white. Um, and so basically, you're trying to put different pieces, like there's a white team and a black team, and you're trying to turn most of the board your color. So like if you put a black one here and a black one here, I think that would turn all of these black. So that's the idea is you're trying to change the color. And it's called Othello. Hmm. So obviously we have the black and white imagery, which we see a lot in Othello. But also I think this idea here of um, turning her virtue into pitch, turning the white into black, turning this bad, is and it literally says turn her virtue into pitch. Pitch is like dark black kind of thing. Um, so he's literally again turning goodness, changing goodness, corrupting things basically. So interesting. I like that idea. I mean, it's evil, but it's interesting. So then Rodrigo comes back, and Rodrigo is like, I've been beaten up and I'm going to go home. This is not working out. But Iago somehow convinces him. He's like, look, Cassio's fired. So everything's good. You got what you wanted. And so Rodrigo's sticking around for some reason. And that's about it. So the plans are in motion. We know that um, Iago wants to get Desdemona and Cassio talking together about the job so that then he can convince Othello that Desdemona and Cassio are together. So we'll see what happens in Act 3.